This week, we welcome Tom Garrubba, CISO from the Santa Fe Group, to discuss third-party vendor management. In the Leadership and Communications segment, CEOs share their most helpful and unconventional career advice, 3 lessons from emerging leaders on the power of differing perspectives, new breed of security vendor spells trouble for pure play firms, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Security can't solve crucial problems when they have to wade through thousands of alerts a day. With ServiceNow, you can easily prioritize and respond to your most crucial business threats. That way you can go from overwhelmed to under control. ServiceNow brings security, risk, and IT together on one platform. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ServiceNow. How do you stay ahead of attackers while trying to maintain the strength of your current security posture? At TrustedSec, they believe research goes hand in hand with security consulting. In addition to their established security offerings, they continually advance their own expertise with a dedicated, experienced research team led by Carlos Perez that works on short and long-term projects to assist their consultants during engagements, developing proprietary attack vectors and investigating new threats. Go to trustedsec.com/Security Weekly to learn more about the pioneering research team at TrustedSec. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 133, recorded June 24th, 2019. I am your host, Matt Alderman, in Colorado, where it's finally above 60 degrees, which is why I have the short-sleeved shirt on today. Joined by my co-hosts, Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque in G-Unit Studio in Rhode Island.
Hello.
Hello.
It was a race condition.
Absolutely. Who's going to go first?
That's it.
It's always
first
you, Paul.
in, first out.
It's always you.
It's like DHCP. Whoever responds first
That's right.
gets the IP address.
Well, the beauty is when you're both in studio, you can just do the double shot view, so you can both say hi roughly at the same time.
Beautiful. And it was a beautiful weekend here in Rhode Island, too. So
It was nice, I guess. Opened my pool up and everything.
Awesome. Well, let's hope it stays nice because I'm coming in tonight. I'll be there the rest of the week in studio. So let's hope for some good weather. See. Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for both Black Hat and DEF CON. If you'd like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your request. I do believe most of our sponsored interview segments are sold out. We are still working on Paul's Security Weekly because we're actually going to do that show live from Black Hat, so we can work on that one. We might have a few other slots open up on the interview side. So if you're interested, definitely get in soon because it's filling up fast. Also, some of you have told us that you are overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find what you're interested in, we've created our new listener interest list. Sign up for the list and select your interest by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the list. I am in the middle of almost getting the website ready where these new interests are actually going to be filtered and searchable on the new website. So if you're interested in certain topics, we're getting ready probably in early Q3 to get the new website up and running. And then you can actually select those interests and filter down some of the content. It'll make it a lot easier to find what we're doing out there. Also, you can also submit your suggestions for guests in our recently released guest suggestion form. Go to securityweekly.com/guests and enter your suggestions. All right, let's get to our interview. Tom Garrubba is Senior Director and CISO at Santa Fe Group, the Shared Assessments Program. He is an internationally recognized thought leader, lecturer, and blogger on third-party risk, and is the head instructor for the Certified Third-Party Risk Professional Program. Previously, Tom was a senior privacy manager at a Fortune 10 US-based healthcare company, where he implemented and managed a world-class third-party risk program. He has over 20 years of experience in IT security, privacy, audit, and compliance in industry and public consulting. Tom, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you very much, Matt. Great to be here.
So I got to start with a little story because I know the Santa Fe Group and I know the Shared Assessment Program from a while ago. And one of the things, Tom, I want to understand is some of the things that have happened over the years. So let's start the story. So 2003, start my first company. It's a consulting company. And I land a contract with National City Bank at the time, which is now part of PNC Bank, to come in and run their third-party vendor management program. And back then, it was decentralized procurement. So I think something like 70,000 vendors. I had to build workflows and all the processes around it. And one of the things, obviously, we did back then was, looked at different standards. ISO, NIST 853 was just kind of in its early draft stages, really to identify different controls to implement for the third parties. Later, as we got into 2004 timeframe, we definitely, bits in the shared assessment program started to come into play, started to correlate a lot of the different security controls from the different banks together, and that's continued to evolve. So I had really early interaction with the shared assessment program, but update us on kind of where the program is today, and then I'd love to kind of break into some interesting discussion.
Sure, absolutely. And you hit a lot of those points, Matt. The Shared Assessments Program was founded by 10 of the largest banks plus the Big Four. And it was designed to help address a lot of needs that the banks had. One of those at the time was this thing called third-party risk. What exactly is it? And it was recognized as being a dominance risk because a lot of organizations are outsourcing key process, key functions to these vendors. And there was a lot of curiousness as to, do they have the same security and privacy controls that we have within the bank? And there was really no way for them to think and say, okay, what do we need to do from a due diligence perspective? So the BITS organization came together and they formed what was originally the foundational for the Shared Assessments Program. The Shared Assessments Program was part of the BITS framework up until about 2010, 2012. And then the CEO, the first CEO of the BITS framework, Kathy Allen, left the organization and started her own organization called the Santa Fe Group. And at that time, the CEO of Wells Fargo turned to her and said, there's other organizations and other industries that are really struggling with third-party risk. It's not just the banking sector. And so what they did for the first time is they started to open up the thought leadership looking for other industries and for other organizations to come together and try to tackle this thing called third-party risk. And I could share this. We mentioned that I was with a Fortune 10 healthcare company. I was the senior privacy manager at CVS, and we were struggling with a FTC consent decree. That's public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything unknown. And one of the things we had to do was get on board and come up with a third-party risk management program. And I happened to, in my research, noticed that the Shared Assessments program was available and reached out to them. And it just happened to be that they were looking for other organizations outside of financial services to join the program. And I represented, ultimately, CVS into the Shared Assessments program, and I was the first non-financial services steering committee member outside of regular outsourced providers that they had from the healthcare industry to have the pleasure of being on their steering committee and showing them other things that needed to be addressed from a regulatory perspective, when you're talking about HIPAA and all these other components outside of OCC regulations and all the like that they had to deal with from the banking industry. And later on, after running the program there for about 5 years, I actually joined. I left CBS and joined the Shared Assessments program, and helping drive the thought leadership, helping other organizations and other industries understand what third-party risk is and how they can take that within their own organizations and see the value of working with the security folks, with the procurement folks, with the legal folks, with the privacy folks, and having that understand that everybody has a role in addressing third-party risk. And as that was going on, you start seeing models. Perhaps you've heard of the 3 lines of defense model come out. Who should be addressing third-party risk at these levels? Is it the first line? Is it the second line? And so we were, that was something that we were helping to get organizations to better understand as well. And so now when I joined, we had about 75, 80 member organizations, large, small, mid-sized banks, assessment firms, and licensees. Now we're over 300, and we're global. And it's what it is. It's the thought leadership. It's organizations coming together from financial services, from healthcare, from utilities to tech, saying, what do we need to do to address third-party risk and making sure that we're pretty much all singing from the same hymn? Because everybody has a different tolerance for risk. And I've often used the term, we're in the risk mitigation business, okay? Our job is to reduce that level of risk without taking away from the organization what they do best. In the business units, their job is to make money for the organization. Our job is to make sure that they slow down a little bit, and we do the proper due diligence to make sure that we truly trust this particular vendor getting 10,000 records, 10 million records of whatever type of data it is. So that's really in a nutshell what the Shared Assessments program has become. And as I mentioned earlier, off camera, I just got back from London. We've been seeing some explosive growth over there due to GDPR, operational resilience, and all of these other components that are touching all these elements of third-party risk with their main vendors. Concentration risk. I can go on and on. This is a topic because you could probably figure I could talk hours on, actually.
Yeah,
You're making our jobs very easy, Tom. It's awesome.
Yeah, really easy. So, Tom,
that's good.
One of the things with the shared assessment program that I think is an interesting part of it is the concept of shared. There's now a lot of shared platforms out there. CyberGRX and others have been building platforms to try to make it easier to share that data. How are you working with them? Are they member organizations? How do they fit into what you guys are doing in the shared assessment program?
Sure. There are some of them that we're content providers to them. For instance, TrueSight, organizations such as them and some other organizations, numerous GRC platforms, we've provided content to them. And in some way, shape, or form, if the content is not directly purchased by them, their members are already utilizing tools such as the SIG questionnaire or the Standardized Control Assessment, the SCA, which provides actual test steps for them to validate that the control exists and it's operating effectively. And it's, you have some organizations that say, we want to do it our particular way. And, we're utilizing certain questions and that's fine. They're a utility. It's a tool. Things change. And what we do is we're looked at as the thought leadership of that. And we provide the content. We had many organizations came and said, I just want the content. I want to be able to take the content and put it into my tool, whether it's a questionnaire, whether it's part of a risk management modeling tool, whatever the case may be. And that's what we're looked at to being able to provide that thought leadership.
No, that's great. I mean, from a perspective like where I come from, so I come from the IT professional services and managed services arena, and we have 6,000 customers at Carousel, right? So we're constantly doing the dance of vendor risk assessment. We hold the keys to the castle to their organizations. We support their networks, their UC infrastructure, pretty much all of their technology, and I mean, it's great to hear that this level of standard is starting to come across multiple organizations because again, it becomes a hard task for our teams to be able to fill out all these vendor questionnaires always, right? And the goal for me is how do we get that standardization across? So the more and more I see people adopting this kind of a framework, the more standardized it comes across for our customers coming to us. And the same thing when we're assessing our vendors. We're all talking the same language. We're asking similar questions.
And the
it
more
streamlines
questions,
the process.
more questions, the better, right? You prefer questions with at least 600 questionnaires.
Well, we've talked about this
or
before,
more,
right? I mean, part of the issue is sometimes the organization assessing us doesn't quite understand the services we're providing.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up getting a questionnaire that's like 1,200 questions long.
Yeah, it happens to Sam all the time here, and she comes to Matt and I, and she's like, "What am I supposed to do with this? What is going on?"
Right, and then a 5-minute conversation with their privacy person, their vendor management person, whatever the case may be. It slims it down to under 100 questions sometimes because they just don't understand the services we're providing.
And allow me to add this, gentlemen. The reason why that happens, and I'm just going to be frank, it's laziness. It really is. And the reason why I say it's laziness is, we're in security. 90% of the time we're in reactionary mode, right? Mm-hmm. So people are reacting. Oh my gosh, we're going to be transacting data with this particular vendor in 2 weeks. I need to assess them. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Okay, well, here's a questionnaire. Just hand this off to them.
Well, Tom, it's also fear as well. And from our perspective, we're a marketing, advertising firm, right? But I think if fear plays it, I totally agree. It's like last minute, like here are all the questions, let's cover our bases. Yeah. But a lot of that stemmed from fear because what was the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, right? It was a marketing company. So now we're a marketing company. And they're like, hold on, no, wait. Every marketing company, regardless of what they do, has to fill out the full questionnaire because we don't want to be the next Facebook, right?
Because they're trying to cover themselves.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, and that comes back to, and allow me to say to use a popular expression that I've used. I said, people are going out there buying these GRC platforms, buying all these tools, and I said, the best tool you have is right here, and people fail to use it. I've often used the expression when I talk to organizations, when I talk to companies, I said, how many of you folks assess your custodial staff? I said, think of what they're exposed to. You think they're just walking around cleaning your wastebasket, sweeping the floors? No, they're exposed to everything on your desks, everything on your printers, everything on your, whatever the case may be. And do you assess them? And if so, what are the questions are you asking them? Primarily, I'm sitting there looking. Okay, have you done personnel checks on them? Do they have criminal records? And second, do you allow them to walk around doing their job with one of these things? A couple of snapshots, and then it's on the dark web. And people forget to ask those type of questions. They ship out a questionnaire, and it's like going, okay, my custodial staff. I don't know about the cloud. What am I doing in the cloud? Business continuity. Somebody calls off sick, I get somebody else. What do you want me to do? They're just asking the wrong questions. And so that's why I've tried to drive the expression of have an understanding of what they're doing. Work with the business line. Work with the vendor. And oftentimes the vendor will be honest and tell you what's going on, not necessarily the business unit. And I've often said, I want to see the data elements. Show me the documentation of what you're getting. Because again, a lot of times, business units and or the vendor for that matter might say, oh, I'm just getting first name, last name, street address, and IP address. And then you start looking at data going, wait a minute, what's SS pound sign? Oh, social security numbers. What's CC pound sign? Oh, credit card numbers. Now I got PCI I got to worry about. And the list goes on.
No, and that's a great point. I mean, it's not just limited to your technology vendors, right? It's your financial vendors, it's your operational support vendors. It's if you're bringing in legal counsel, that's a third-party vendor. I mean, it spans the entire company. No matter what type of vendor they're coming in, vendor risk management is organization-wide.
And you gentlemen probably have made aware of this for quite an extensive period. The industry that was breached the most was the legal profession. Yeah. Because organizations were going into law firms, not because they're trying to steal personally identifiable information. They're trying to play the market. They're looking at mergers and acquisition data. And people forget, oh my gosh, we got to assess our law firms? Yeah, you should at least be asking them from a due diligence perspective, what do you have controls in place? I have a friend of mine with a mid-size law firm here in the Pittsburgh area. And I often use this. He goes, as long as you don't use my name. I said, I won't use your name, but I'll use your title. He's the chief operating officer. And he flat out told me, says, from a security and privacy perspective, we only do what our customers tell us what they want. And that's really what it is. Now, that was a couple of years ago. I'm starting to see a trend now in the law industry, in the legal services firm. They're starting to move towards ISO certifications. They're trying to move towards be able to show, hey, look, we do have this background in information security and in privacy matters that we're able to protect the data. Yeah. And so whether they're building those into their fee engagements, I imagine they are. But you know what? That's a very interesting industry. I'll just say that.
The other.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say the other one I had. This was a big one, right? Because when I walked into the bank's like, well, we're assessing IBM and First Data and all their big vendors, and I'm like, look, those guys probably secure. It's the mom and pops. It's
right.
It's the guy you're sending the data to print statements for all your wealth management customers, and they have access to the social security number. Yeah, probably pretty high risk, right? But they weren't thinking about that at the time. Janitors, you mentioned janitors was a big one. There were some that you could low risk out, but you really had to understand on your risk assessment, what areas were you concerned with? Use that as a guide to determine not only which questions to ask, but how deep to ask those questions based on that risk profile. And the one thing that we spent a lot of time crafting back in the day was the risk assessment to what ultimately is the SIG, the standard information gathering questions, and making it really easy to narrow that down to only what needed to be asked. And that was a lot of work, but it worked pretty well once we had that fine-tuned.
Yeah, and that's a great point, man. I mean, everybody in the supply chain is an extension of your business, right? No matter where they lie within the organization. Yeah. Every single one of them is. But and we have to be agnostic, right? We have to be business unit agnostic. We have to be vendor agnostic, partner agnostic, and treat them. Best practice, classify the vendors, right? Know what range they are within your organization. What risk,
it sounds like
classify
there's
the vendors.
in hearing everyone talk about it, right? There's a big difference between someone you're electronically partnered with and sending information or data back and forth versus someone who has physical access and or has a physical something in your building or on your network, right? Those are all different classifications. I think we need to go. I'm just
100%.
reminded, like the university, we used to have the check printer.
Yep.
And like there was someone in there servicing that like every other week because it was old.
Exactly.
But that's like a huge thing. You want to make sure that person's, vetted.
The other thing we did at the bank is we classified the service, not the vendor. Because you could easily have a vendor provide dozens of services. First Data was a big one. Fiserv. There's a bunch of them that offer a lot of services. You couldn't just classify the vendor. You actually had to look at the different services they were providing and then assess risk against the service and then assess the controls against the service they were providing.
And then not forget fourth party risk. Are they subcontracting out?
Yeah.
Right? Take it down to that next level.
Yeah. Oh, it dives deeper. I've often used the term, you're going to hear a lot of these little things, the limbo effect, right? Limbo. How low can you go? And that's a common question I get from many organizations. How far should I go? Fourth party, fifth party, sixth party. It really comes down to how many hands are touching the data. And that's based on your individual risk tolerance, following your risk tolerance and following what's going on with the vendor. And it gets back to scoping. And this is a common trick that I shouldn't say trick. It almost sounds like a scheme, but something common that you'll see that a particular business unit will say, okay, I'm giving 10,000 records to ABC vendor, and it's just going to be white page information. So what happens, you look at them and you assess them based on the scope of work, based on what they told you, based on location and everything else being constant here. And then if you approve the vendor and they move forward with it, I got this call all the time. 6 months later, 8 months later, hey, Tom, this vendor was great. Now we're going to give them 1 million records of cardholder data. Do I have your blessing to move forward with it? And they're going, wait a minute, time out here. That's not what we assess them on.
Right.
We assess them based on this particular scope. Now they're going to start doing this. Now I need to go in. Do they have network segmentation? What are they doing from encryption? We didn't ask for that on the front end because of what they were handling. Now we are. And that's where you really have to help to pull the reins on a little bit with the business units. I think one of the best lines of advice I ever got when I reported into our chief privacy officer, he said, don't look at us as a cost center. we're a value center. The value we're bringing to the business unit as well as the organization is we're not there to impede you from doing business, but we're there to have you think twice of the risk that's involved with doing certain transactions and making sure we're protecting the company. So I think that's a key point too, is to understand the scopes of work, where your data points are, and also understanding what's involved with the contract. You might have components in your contract that says certain regions or certain locations are not permitted to be in touch with my data.
Yeah, restricted data, right?
Right.
Domestic. We have lots of customers who require domestic data.
Yeah. Is procurement kind of the gatekeeper now for a lot of these third-party programs, since they're the ones that have to authorize payments? Are you seeing more and more of the procurement teams kind of leading the effort than working across privacy and finance and compliance and security, et cetera, teams to pull it all together? Or is it still pretty siloed? Because back then it was pretty siloed.
It was. And this is where you get into this a little bit, Matt, of this first line of defense, second line of defense. It always starts at the business unit. It really does, because the business unit's in charge of running the relationship. They're really on the hook from a risk perspective as to knowing what organizations are doing with your data. Procurement, and this is the struggle that I see with a lot on the procurement side. Procurement sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm going out there and I'm looking at everything from risk ratios and making sure they're going to be an ongoing entity financially. Now you want me to assess them based on security and privacy risk? I can't do that. And this is where you have to, of what I've instructed organizations, to having relationships with organizations. I'll give you an example. Back when I was at CVS, one of the last things I did before I came to shared assessments directly was we developed what was called the VIC, Vendor Information Controls Check Sheet. And what we did was we were getting all of these vendors coming in that just were they weren't mature enough to handle certain aspects of data and certain processes. And to help my team head that off at the pass, we reached out to procurement and said, look, give them this questionnaire as part of the RFP, okay? Based on the data, based on the process. If it was basic PII or if it was company confidential information, maybe the questionnaire we had for them was 25 questions, kind of like a pre-assessment to the assessment. And they said, well, what do we do when we get that back? I said, we'll look at it. You don't have to make a decision. We'll look at it. We'll tell you whether or not we feel comfortable up front moving forward with this vendor. And that actually helped weed out organizations that they realized they couldn't do business with because they were just too risky. And we did that with basic information as well as extended data, protected health information, cardholder information, et cetera. And it really reduced the headaches, the time lags of having to do an actual assessment, because we already had those questions and it was part of what we were using, which was, came out of the SIG. And so we already got the answers to those questions. Now we can go deeper. So, but to get back to your question, we were at CVS, we were in the privacy group. A lot of organizations build their third-party risk programs into information security. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that, because one of the most overlooked components in a third-party risk program is paper-based data. Mm-hmm. A lot of organizations concentrate on the electronic form. They forget paper. Paper still exists out there, or else Iron Mountain probably wouldn't be in business, or a lot of these other Shred-its, et cetera, wouldn't be in business. So I've often tried to tell people, don't neglect paper-based data. And so with that being the case, have an understanding of who's responsible for these. And with that being the case, here in the States, still a lot of third-party risk management programs are based in information security. When I go overseas to London, a lot of these are either done at the operational level or it's handled on the privacy side. I'm starting to see a shift, procurement side. I'm starting to see more of a shift into the procurement and privacy realm. There's still some in information security. I believe it was switched over into privacy because of GDPR. When GDPR came into effect, everybody's going, oh my gosh, where's all my data going? Not just internally, but externally. Not trying to sound like Joe Friday here, but Article 28 of GDPR says it addresses the processor perspective. Do you know where your data is going outside of your organizations and your sub-processors of your processors? And it forces you to target your data and track your data, all the points in between it where it's going to, which ties back into fourth-party risk. So, and I know that was an additional question. With fourth parties, that's very tricky. In many cases, the fourth parties you have with your third parties, you probably already have a relationship with them. And if you have that relationship by contract, you can certainly go in, if you have the right to audit clause and all that, you can go in and you can do assessments on them. The trick is when you don't have that relationship, then I've often went back to the third party and says, tell me how you got the level of comfort to dealing with this data. And please don't tell me they were the cheapest, which is often the case. Using them because they were the cheapest. So I would ask them and say, I'm now assessing your third-party risk management, Mr. Vendor, because I want to make sure that if you're turning my data over to somebody over here, that I'm comfortable with them getting that with their overall security and privacy controls as well. So that's how that goes around.
Great. Yeah, that's great.
Jason?
I saw here that you're the head instructor for the Certified Third-Party Risk Professionals Program. For me, I think that's a great type of certification to have in an organization like mine. Question becomes, during that process, what are the domains that you're actually teaching these third-party assessors? What are the different skills they're going to obtain by taking the certification? What are the domains and the information you're actually teaching during those courses?
Sure. The CTPRP is there's three components to it. The first one is the foundations. And in the foundation section, we talk about how to get the tone at the top, getting your program up and running, establishing things from a policies and procedures perspective. I know a lot of organizations that try to hide behind a policy, but regardless of what it is. And the problem is, and this is the ex-auditor in me, is when you have a policy with no procedures, there's no teeth. In other words, you're going in and you're sitting there going, well, I have a policy that says my employee shouldn't be doing this, or we should be doing this. Okay, well, are you? Where's the evidence? Right. I need to see that. And the regulators will tell you that too. Regulators will say, it's almost like, God have mercy on your soul if I walk in and you got a policy and you're not following it. In many banks, that stuff goes up to the board. That's an MRA, management requiring attention, matter requiring attention. And that comes out, and it comes out hard within an organization. So we focus on policies and procedures. What exactly are the scopes of work that you should be focusing on? What is the data? What do you do with respect to contracts? Do you understand what certain components in the contracts are? What about metrics? What metrics are of interest to you? What metrics are of interest to your C-suite that you report to? What metrics are of interest when you go to the board? So we cover that in foundational principles. Then the second part, we actually focus on assessments. And we focus on assessment attributes, security attributes. The tools were always foundationally built on ISO 27000. So anything that you're familiar with on the ISO 27000 realm, you're going to see in Section 2 that we talk about. So we go through risk assessment, we go through network security, change management, information security, access controls. We get into business continuity, cloud, because for many organizations, for many people that attend these, they've only heard about it, but they really don't know what it is. So it gives people a better understanding. Oh, I'm in procurement. So what exactly is a community cloud? Now they know. What's the difference between disaster recovery and business continuity? Now they know. So we're helping these folks to drive that, because it's not just security folks that attend a lot of these sessions. I've had everyone from legal to business continuity to audit to procurement that sit in, and now they understand better what their role is in the third-party chain. IT as well, and other business unit entities. And then lastly, the third part of that is doing an actual assessment. I don't like to necessarily use the term proper way, because every organization wants to do it their way. But, when the program was built, there was individuals like myself and about 5 or 6 other people from very mature programs, very mature organizations that got together and said, you know what, this is how we did it. We were really successful at it. So we kind of built this best practice of here you should do an assessment, how you doing kickoffs, when you should have touch points, when you should, in terms of reports, what should your reports look like? And all these other metrics built into it to help people understand, looking at your own program. That's one of the things that I've told people is so many organizations when they're told we need a third-party risk management program, go build it, they shoot for utopia. This is how I want it to be, and it's almost like fantasy land. I try to tell them, guys, there's a reason why it's called utopia, because it doesn't exist. How do you eat it? I always use the term, how did you eat a steak? But then I realized, I've had people that were, vegetarians or vegans in my room. So I said, how do you eat a salad? And I just say, how do you eat a meal? One bite at a time. That's the same way when you're doing your third-party risk management program or any program. Do it one bite at a time. Anything you're going to do, make it achievable. Where do I want to be next year? I've often joked and said, I'd love to run a marathon. You're not going to see me below my waist, but hey, it's not going to happen within the next 2 to 3 years. But if you start putting in manageable steps, you could probably do it within 2 to 3 years. And that's what I've tried to tell people is, put yourself in a position to win. Put yourself in a position to succeed. Nobody wants to be behind the 8 ball. It's not a comfortable place to be in. And particularly when you're getting an auditor or a regulator darking your door, you have to defend yourself. So with respect to that, it's just having the understanding front to back of what a good, solid foundational program should look like. And that's what we do. And then there's a 145 question exam. You take the exam, and if you pass it, if you have the experience behind you in security and any of those components that touch third-party risk, you become a CTPRP, Certified Third-Party Risk Professional. If you don't, if you're a weak, because we actually have a committee that reviews every single person that passed the exam and looks at what they've done in the past when you hand in those forms. And we say, do they get the Certified Third-Party Risk Professional or do they get the Associate Professional, which means you're a little weak overall. We feel within about a year or 2 years, when you've been doing this, the A rolls away and then you're a full certified third-party risk professional. And we have over 1,100 people that have passed the exam. And if you go on LinkedIn or other places like that, you'll see a lot of organizations that are looking for third-party risk professionals that are asking for CTPRPs or similar certifications. So
that's outstanding.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah,
but,
it's
really
very
about
interesting.
knowledge sharing. It's about education, and that's what it's all about. We're all in this world. We're all in this together to address and mitigate risk.
Yeah. No, you had mentioned something during the program of you performing the assessments, and then when do you have touch points, right? And these are one of the things that my team struggles with is how do you continuously monitor those third parties, right? I look at sometimes those third party risk assessments are point in time assessments. It's time for the annual vendor risk assessment. Start shooting everything out to all of your vendors, and that's a point in time. The place in my utopia would be how do you just continuously monitor those third party organizations, because 6 months after the assessment something could go sideways. Right. And how do you keep that?
Absolutely. And you know what? There's numerous tools that are out there. And you know what? We all probably know who they are. And they're licensees of the program or whatnot. But there's a lot of good tools out there, whether you're using things like, a BitSight or Scorecard or using LexisNexis, even if it's just Google feeds on your critical vendor. There's a merger and acquisition or something else. And even working with procurement. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody and said, we ran all of the security things, we ran all these various scores on them to make sure that they were looking good. And then just by chance, we got a feed from procurement that said Moody's downgraded their bond rating. Am I going to worry about that? Yeah. If I'm entering into a 5-year contract, maybe I'm going to worry about this. So it's getting all of the right information for you to show evidence that you're continuously monitoring the vendors. It might not just need to be from a security threat perspective, but from an ongoing entity perspective. Here's another thing. Following your data, knowing where your data is. This is something that happened in the UK, and the UK regulators talk about this to this day. It was about 3 years ago where flooding occurred in I believe it was Bangalore in India. And it brought to a halt the British banking system for a day and a half. And it's not because the flooding put a bunch of servers underwater. It's because you have a city of 11 million people that people can't get into service properly. and support your applications. I mean, human nature is I got to take care of my own family here when you're having flooding from a typhoon and things of that nature. So you have to look at geographic list and see where the problem is going on. So with that being the case, monitoring from a geographic perspective of what's going on, from a geopolitical perspective, are we doing things in a hotspot area that, maybe we need to talk to our primary, service provider and say, you know what, I don't need you to share with me all of your customers, but if you're doing primarily 80% of the industry processing there, can you please move my data over here for its primary processing? There's different ways you can work with that. And that's one of the things that the British regulators have really been pushing on is concentration risk as part of operational resilience. Mm-hmm. Do you have an understanding of where you stand in your recovery of your critical vendors and your critical operational business units?
Tom, where can people go to get more information if they want to learn more about shared assessment program, the certification process? Where should they go?
They can go right to our website, sharedassessments.org, and just go through there. We have all kinds of white paper studies that we've done with organizations like Poneman and Protiviti, as well as the certification. We have free tools out there for them. Anybody can download our free tools. We have for free a vendor risk management maturity model that helps organizations get a gauge as to where they stand today with respect to the maturity of their program. And a lot of organizations have used it to show their management, to show their audit, to show their regulators, here's where we are today, and here's where our targets are for next year. We also have what's called a data processor privacy toolkit that organizations can download for free, which actually maps back to GDPR, particular Article 28, that shows recommendations with respect to what do you need from a documentation perspective, what artifacts you should have on file, in your vendor relationship to cover yourself in the event there's a data breach, as well as a target data tracker, so you could see all of the third and fourth parties that are in possession or coming in contact with your data. As well as any of the educational components that are out there as well. You can get all of that at sharedassessments.org.
That's awesome. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for the time. Really appreciated it. Thank you.
Great to meet you, Tom.
We'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.